All right, and we're on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the. Oh, let me admit this person. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the November 13th MakerDAO Core Community Meeting, or just regular community meeting. I don't know why I said core. But welcome, welcome. This is our weekly meeting that we do to kind of talk about all the stuff that's going on in Makerland. Everything from recent hires to like events, milestones. We also have this hour we have a portion of this hour open just for regular community questions. We're trying to also do a burning question of the week sort of thing, but that's neither here nor there. So if anybody has any burning questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But yeah, so this week we have in our chat, we have Richard Brown here, we have Jessica Salomon, who's our community manager, and we have Nick, who's one of our awesome devs from the team, and everybody else here is strictly community. Hold on one second. All right, so a couple of notable things that actually I just saw. I think we just hit 1 million ETH locked in our system, which is about 1% of all ETH. We've been floating around that for the last couple weeks, but now I think it's official. So, ooh, uh, gosh, it's so quiet up here. All right, we have two new hires this week. One person, Adrian Leb, who's on our JS product development team, and Nikolai, who's our technical account manager. And I think he's in Copenhagen, but I'm not 100% sure. Another notable thing is we hit 70 million DAI. I think we're almost at 72 now. But that's also really exciting. We're coming up on that 100 million debt ceiling. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe that's a good burning question for us to focus on a little bit later. What do we do in approach of the second debt ceiling of 100 million? Uh, Notable mentions. There was the XDAI burner wallet that Andrew Griffith, I think his name was, came out with. Everybody kind of raved about it earlier in the week, and it is really cool. So definitely check that out if you have a chance. Uh, Orion X, which is a exchange catering to the Chilean and Mexican markets, is now offering DAI pairs, so you could check that out if you are a Chilean or Mexican. Uh, Also, Swap Online is offering DAI as a pair uh, listed against BTC and USDT for their atomic swap exchange. Uh, Two more things. Okay, so Steven Becker was on the Boost VC podcast. We got a little bit of an early release a couple weeks ago about that, but I think that the Boost VC podcast like officially put it out this week, so that's exciting. I got a chance to listen to that, and Steven is awesome on the mic. Definitely check him out. He also hosts our governance and risk meetings every Thursday. So if you guys are interested in more meetings, talking with us at Maker and learning about our ecosystem and how things work, definitely jump in there. It's a very educational experience. It's awesome. I love it. And also, I saw that the Settle Virtual Hackathon 2 was just announced, and we are a sponsor. And the winner of that is going to get a 1,500 DAI prize on top of what I think Settle is actually giving. I think they're doing a $5,000 award to the winner, but Rich can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Yeah, that's about it for all the announcements that I kind of gathered from this week. It's been a pretty relatively slow week. I mean, last week we had the new CDP portal, we had the roadmap to multi-collateral DAI. We had a couple things going on, and all of our team is slowly returning from Prague, and everybody's sort of getting settled in, and things are back on track in terms of development and further carrying along as we get closer and closer to multi-collateral DAI. So yeah, that's all I have to note. Anybody here? Hey, Rich, do you want to talk about maybe the Settle Virtual Hackathon 2? What are they trying to do over there?
Sure, I can talk about it a bit. I'm not the world's greatest expert on settle finance, but what they're doing is there's a trend in the industry. Actually, this is a trend that's been happening since day one because I'm old and I remember what the internet used to look like. Creating portals and sort of wrapping up various cryptographic primitives is becoming kind of a big thing now these days. And what Settle Finance is doing is attempting to make sort of a dashboard I don't know whether they'd appreciate the comparison, but I'm going to make it anyways. So it's sort of like a Bloomberg-esque kind of a dash, where they sort of aggregate and create tools around the various financial or the decentralized finance packages or projects in this space. Right now, it allows you to, in a sort of a single dashboard, single pane of glass, it allows you to track your portfolio, uh, set watches, I think, on gas prices. There's some trading functionality that they're going to be integrating. So it's basically an attempt to attach to the back ends of a bunch of different financial organizations like Dharma, Didix, or MakerDAO, and put it into a unified interface with a layer of community building on top of it, which I think is really interesting. So people have already expressed interest in it, and we have a lot of people that have come to me or yeah, I guess me, um, asking about ways that they can build for the system. And frequently, a lot of those people are front end developers. And in our space, a front end developer usually needs to team up with a Solidity developer to get anything done, really. And one of the interesting things about Settle is that they expose a bunch of APIs inside their tool, so it allows people that have front end experience to start mixing and matching backends and creating new ways of looking at the sort of the crypto stuff that we're all up to. So,
Do you expect them to integrate like their own version of a CDP dashboard integrated with our system?
well, I'm hoping that they do. There's, as you're probably aware, maybe some other people are. I'm super keen on monitoring and analytics and alerting when it comes to CDPs. I think that it's a matter of measuring risk, and when you're measuring risk, it's good to know when things change and when something bad happens. And one of the things I'd love to see is a dashboard that would throw up warnings when your collateralization rate becomes risky, or something happens in the market that might affect an asset class. And there's one developer I know of that's already interested in building for that. So I would love to see some kind of some advanced analytics in the Settle Finance
Yeah.
interface. I think that
Do you
might be
know if they're trying to be an Oracle provider or anything like that? No, right?
No, I don't think so. That's the oracles are sort of a non-trivial problem. I think that
Got it. Got it. Yeah. All right. So if anybody has any questions, if anybody from the community, I'm happy to open it up for questions and just for sort of a free discussion right now, because I kind of went over everything and can't really think of anything particularly burning. Uh, what about you, Rich? Do you have any ideas?
well, traditionally, this is where Jess tells us about what's happening in the events world. So maybe we
Oh
can
yeah,
talk about
that's
that.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
So what is happening in the events world, Jess?
Yeah, that's a great question, you guys. Well, we just had a whole slew of events in terms of DevCon, and I've actually been traveling on vacation this past week. But what I would love, and I talked to you, David and Rich, a little bit about this, is to get ready for these events in the UK that would be coming up in this 12-week hackathon, and sort of figuring out how it is that we'll expose MakerDAO to students and universities over there, and what sort of challenges we're looking to present to them. And then also, Nick is going to be likely giving a talk on November 19th in Professor Dawn Song's class at UC Berkeley on stablecoins.
Is that a class on stablecoins or is that a talk on stablecoins?
Yeah, that's a talk on stablecoins.
Gotcha. That's cool. I wish I saw that Lev did a talk recently in Poland. I wish I could have been a fly on that wall. Lev is awesome. He's very articulate.
Yeah, definitely. I think Lenka will be able to hop on in a bit and give us a bit of an update on how that went. But that seemed like that was a really awesome event. They held it at the Google campus in Warsaw. And it was both Lev and Pavel, another all-star.
Yeah, that I keep hearing this theme of money being originally based on credit, and I heard it in Zandy's talk, and I also saw it in the tweet of Lenka when she was telling us a bit about what Lev was talking about, and it's really awesome. There's actually a great book called Debt: The First 5,000 Years. I forget who the author is, but they get into the whole history of money and how it's like it's never really been barter. even though that's like where economists love to like go to try to explain how money sort of it came about. But it's really fascinating to think that it's really credit systems and informal credit systems at that in sort of more ancient societies.
Actually, we have Dave Levine in the call, and Dave recently, I don't know if I should say recently, yeah, last month, released a video explainer about MakerDAO, and it's actually one of the favorite ones that I've seen in a while. And I'm gonna post that link.
Is that the one that was like it had a bunch of like scenes and it was like acted out? It was like buying Maker from a robot. Is that the one?
No.
No.
This is an entirely different demographic. But Dave, if you had some questions, yeah, please feel free to hop on the mic and let us know.
All right, thank you. Is it on? Yes.
Yeah, you're on.
And I'm somewhat new to this, so I hope it's not too naive or off topic or something. But the first one is regarding, and I know this isn't the governance meeting per se, but regarding governance or setting rates, is it when you talk about the community being involved in voting, are you talking about determining how much collateral for a particular asset class that you would need? In other words, Ethereum is 150 to 100. You can create 100 DAI on 150 Ethereum. Is that are you looking to have just the community voting and saying, well, I think you should have 160 Ethereum to 100, or is it different issues? Or I just one fear I have is that the masses are not always the most informed, and people are voting on things that could get crazy. I'm wondering where does that divide, or what is the community supposed to decide?
I'd love to speak to that if I could. So, maker holders are sort of a diverse group of actors in the system, and there's going to be inevitably like a part of these holders that are not particularly set to vote on the more specific details of collateral types and risk and all that kind of stuff. But I think that our COO, Stephen Becker, and also head of risk, he has been putting out these articles on risk governance. And the idea is for the more empirical decisions on surrounding collateral, there's going to be sort of a scientific governance process. And so the way that would work is there would be an assessment, a qualitative assessment on every proposed collateral. And I think that basically what would happen is there would be risk teams. And this is all sort of in theory because I'm not 100% sure. So sort of take my words with a grain of salt. But I believe that the model is that the community would vote on risk teams, and each risk team would have a certain weighing. And the idea is eventually for there to be multiple different risk teams, and everybody would sort of be able to come at the question of collateral in a very sort of scientific, data-driven, empirical way. And Stephen has been laying down sort of the foundation for how to go about that. And so like with every collateral, there's all these different kinds of risks, like liquidity risk and counterparty risk, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You go down the gamut. But there's always going to be a segment of maker voters that are not going to be participating in those kinds of votes just because it's not going to be like their particular interest. But I think that there is going to be a group of people that will be. And ultimately, I think that if in the discussion surrounding the vote on a particular collateral or parameter or something is wildly, like if everybody sort of agrees in public on something and then the vote reflects something completely different, I think that there's like checks in place to kind of put a pause on that and see what's going on there. Because I don't know, maybe Rich could speak more to the safeguards against sort of malicious actors and like manipulating votes. But
sure. Well, maybe I'll speak, Dave, because I think that the point that you're getting at, I think, is that the wisdom of the crowd is not always something that you want to risk the future of your business on. And there's also, when you're talking about governance, there's also this enormous risk of popularity contests and campaigning and opinions. And when you're dealing with creating a risk portfolio, opinions don't matter. It's just facts that matter. It's data that matters. It's the 100 years of acquired knowledge about how to manage risk that the economic community has accumulated is what matters. And so when it comes time to approve a new asset class for the system, the risk teams initially will be decentralizing that a bit, but the risk teams will forward a proposal, and that proposal involves open data sets, historical trends, data models, and eventually it presents a thesis that says that token ABC has these qualities, and the governing or the organization that runs that token has these qualities, and it has this kind of liquidity, it has this kind of trading volume, it has this kind of historical, this and this and that. And based on this data set, we recommend that the debt ceiling will be this, and the stability fee will be this, and the rest of the risk parameters will be these. So the community will be voting on whether they agree or disagree with this evidence-based opinion of experts. So it's not the community sort of shilling for their whatever bag they have that's the heaviest. It's the community saying whether they agree or disagree with the conclusions of these risk managers.
In other words, the ideas and direction might not be coming from the community, but the community has a chance to sort of stop it from going in a direction.
Yeah, so it's sort of a safety valve in one respect. So if the governance in any kind of model is always an attack vector, and that's something that we've been considering very, very seriously. So the idea is that when these evidence-based proposals come to a vote, they're either right or they're wrong. And if it's a right or wrong situation, the votes should theoretically be overwhelmingly for or against. Right? Overwhelmingly for if it's correct, overwhelmingly against if it's incorrect. And we'll have a sort of a debating process leading up to these votes where we'll be able to identify contention, and we'll be able to revise these proposals or these models before they're implemented. But
right, and my concern is less with the attack and malicious and whatever. It's more of the excited, naive, well-intentioned, putting a lot of time in young people. I have a YouTube channel, and I started talking about MakerDAO, and then I noticed a bunch of people saying, "Oh, I want to get it." And I'm like, "Uh-oh, am I getting people involved?" It's sort of the mania that you see already in other crypto tokens, and
yeah, that's a good point. Like baseless euphoria is almost as like willful ignorance or a planned shilling campaign. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we have these teams of risk managers, because by design they're sort of immune to euphoria and optimism.
Yeah.
And I had sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I was just gonna real quickly mention that it's also the reason why, like, I think part of the reason why our community has been sort of so high quality, even up until this point, is because I think much of the community has been like focused on self-educating and educating each other and providing resources to really understand what MakerDAO is and what the system is. Like, I don't see many like shillers and sort of like very like the sort of toxic crowd that you see in a lot of other crypto tokens appear in our chats very often, surprisingly.
Yeah, well, I think it's early. I think if it's successful in a couple of years, that's more my long-term concern. I also have one other question, if I'm not taking up too much time. I don't.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
I just haven't, and you just point me to an article that explains. I'm sort of confused. I don't understand the shutdown mechanism. The part I'm confused about is, so there's 55. I don't know the latest, how many millions of DAI are out there. Does this shutdown mean that they all disappear? That doesn't make sense to me. What exactly? I don't understand the shutdown. What gets shut down and is the DAI? How do I just haven't been able to understand.
Actually, Nick, you're on the call, right? You might be uniquely.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So the shutdown is essentially everybody gets their money back. I know the shutdown kind of has like a bad connotation, but it's more a reaction to a bad situation and the system trying to protect itself. And by what I mean by protect itself is it's primarily trying to protect people who hold DAI. So essentially what happens is that at the moment that this global settlement happens, the DAI will basically have a fixed collateral price. So, right, if one DAI is worth, I'm just pulling a random number out of my hat here, like 1/500th of an ETH or something like that, or 1/200th of an ETH, at the time that global settlement happens. Now, everyone with DAI can basically go and redeem their DAI in for that amount of ETH. At the same time, people who have CDPs, so people who have created DAI and may or may not be DAI holders as well, the DAI debt that they have basically gets subtracted from their collateral that they've locked up, right? So that's where the collateral is coming from that is paid out to the DAI holders. And the remainder of that collateral, right, which is the difference between their collateral and their debt, right, is goes to the CDP holder, right?
That last thing, can you repeat the second? I understand. I think I understand that the people who hold DAI, if
Sure.
they want, they could keep holding the DAI, but if they're concerned, they could go and trade it for Ether. That I guess, if Ether is plummeting, it's at a fixed amount. I assume. I mean, what happens? I guess in that first scenario, what if the amount that it's locked in that you can exchange it for is very volatile? Does that get adjusted, or
so it doesn't get adjusted? It gets basically fixed at the moment of global settlement.
Yeah.
And effectively, what the intention is that there's going to be, so you have the protocol layer, which is the actual smart contracts. Effectively, what we're banking on is that there will be second layer solutions. So if you, for example, hold your DAI in some kind of smart wallet, when the smart wallet detects a that a global settlement is happening, it immediately cashes in the DAI for the corresponding collateral. And you can even kind of take this permutation a little bit further, where it then trades that collateral into something else that's perhaps more stable than the volatile collateral. But going back to your previous point, since you seem to be a little bit confused about the CDP holders, let me kind of give you an example. So let's say we have a CDP holder who puts 1 ETH, right? It's worth about $200 in a CDP, and he takes out about 50 DAI of debt. And he goes and he spends that 50 DAI on something or trades it away, whatever. And then a global settlement happens. And so what happens now is that effectively from his $200 worth of ETH, $50 of his ETH basically get taken away from him and distributed to whoever holds the 50 DAI that he had originally taken out. And so you, as the CDP holder, you get back your $150 worth of ETH. So your collateral minus your outstanding debt.
I see. So the DAI sort of remains, except for those who decide to exchange, and all of the CDPs then are just done. There's no more collateral.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so it's not that it happens automatically, right? So as a CDP holder, you still have to be like, okay, give me my ETH, and there's no time limit on this, right? Your ETH is not gonna disappear or anything. But effectively, no new CDPs can be opened. No one can create any more DAI, right? The system has just shut down, and the only thing people can do is redeem their DAI in for collateral, which at the moment is just ETH, and withdraw their collateral from their CDPs.
So in your example there, I think you had 100 and whatever you said, 150 in collateral. And then in the global settlement, it took $50 worth of ETH to give to that DAI holder. My remaining then, let's say it was $100 of ETH locked up in collateral. Does that now just sit there, but I can't create DAI on it, or that also gets sent to me and there's no more collateral in the system for that one class?
So it doesn't get sent to you. So everything is a pull model, right? So if you're familiar with CompSci, right, there's a push model and a pull model. So the ETH doesn't just get sent to you, you have to say, hey, give me my ETH.
And otherwise, it's just sitting there with no DAI against it. And
exactly, right. And so there's no risk, right? It's not like you could keep it in there for a year if you wanted to, and it's not right. I mean, the ETH may still go up or down in value, but you're getting the ETH amount, right? It doesn't matter what the dollar value of that ETH is.
And this would be when you have multi-collaterals, you may have a global settlement on one asset class, one crypto asset, but on another one, it doesn't get affected, right? If you do global settlement is per asset, I assume.
I don't believe so. No, I think that the global settlement is a way of winding down the entire system. So there's been some kind of systemic impact to the crypto markets right now, currently, or in multi-collateral diabetes, some kind of horrible things happen to the global financial markets where we'll wind down the system, but presumably everybody has more important things to worry about than their CDPs at that point. But in the new model with multi-collateral, the idea is that we built out this portfolio of risk managed asset classes that have been balanced in such a way that the loss of Ethereum, for example, if Ethereum tipped to the point where a great deal of CDP owners were liquidated, it wouldn't affect the health of the rest of the system. So we wouldn't have to wind it down at that point. So I think in the multi-collateral model and a global settlement, or what we're actually renamed it to emergency shutdown. So an emergency shutdown would only occur if there's an attack on the system itself. So if there was some kind of enormous flaw in the smart contracts that nobody caught, we would initiate a global settlement. If there was an attack on the Ethereum base layer, so there's a flaw in the way that Ethereum just worked, we'd have to do a global shutdown. And then, or if there's a black swan event, but by definition, we can't really guess what that would be. It'd have to be pretty horrible though, because it would take down the gold markets and the real estate markets and all the rest of the crypto markets at the same time. Then there would be a global settlement.
So this is more, I was thinking this was sort of to maintain the peg. I think everything else you do is to maintain a peg. This is to prevent, just complete disaster. So I was thinking this global settlement sounds like a real disaster for Maker holders in general, but that's sort of what it is.
That's what it gets kind of
disaster isn't even worse than that.
It gets kind of interesting when you look at it from that perspective, because it's also, it behaves as a way to save our users or CDP owners and DAI holders from complete disaster. Because if the market is tanking over the course of 5 hours, Ethereum is about to lose 100% of its or 80% of its value. The global settlement would be initiated, and presumably we'd be able to save 50% of DAI owners' value at that point. That'd be the best case scenario, I guess. An example.
It's like a short stop in the case of like a really bad black swan event.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea is that at that point, we're trying to stop the entire system from going completely underwater and still allowing us the opportunity, or allowing the contracts the opportunity to release collateral back against the existing DAI owners without having to dilute the Maker token significantly. But after that point, it's basically a reset of the system. So whatever happened to the financial world, or whatever happened to the crypto financial world, recovers, and then there's a process of kickstarting the MakerDAO ecosystem, and then we start all over again.
Do you know if it has to be like relaunched like all together, or is there just what's the process of like post global settlement or emergency
Actually,
shutdown?
I'm probably not the best person to ask. Nick, do you know if we've actually formalized what that means?
No, we haven't. And I mean, it's all going to come down to the reason of why we globally settled in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, there's some kind of bug or some kind of attack. What kind of attack was it? Is it something that needs to be fixed or addressed, or is it just an instantaneous thing where, we could literally deploy a new system like a second later, right? Was it a attack from the oracles, right? So the oracles can't be trusted anymore. Was it an attack from governance, where someone tried to make some shitcoin worth $100 trillion so they could print infinite amounts of DAI, right? It'll all come down to the specifics of what triggered the global settlement in the first place.
And that also raises an interesting point that I forgot. I was going to mention this. So it also acts as sort of a disincentive for people to mess around with the system, because we talk about Soros level attacks and a bunch of other different ways to manipulate the system, and we sort of have this sort of Damocles hanging over the entire thing that says like, hey, you could try and buy up all the DAI in existence, if you wanted to, or you could try and mess with the governance system and get a completely garbage token included as a major asset class. But if you do, somebody might come along and just reset the entire thing, and we'll start over again, and you're not going to be able to pull off what would be potentially an enormously expensive attack, right? So it's this reminder to anybody that wants to attempt to break the peg that it's going to be super hard to do, because if that peg starts going crazy, then we're just going to turn the system off and start over again.
Okay, great. I get it.
Yeah, that's
Iron.
We can send you some links if you're interested in some deeper.
Sure. Yeah.
Iron Rand asked in the chat in regards to the risk teams and their different assessments of collateral stuff. What is the expected level of divergence between the assessment of different risk teams? If assessing risk is a science, then we might expect multiple risk teams to come to the same conclusion. And I think, like, ideally, yes, like, you'd want the different risk teams to come to similar, very close conclusions. But if you have like two risk teams that are getting something completely different, you have to sort of look at the data that they're using, because there might be some difference in their source, or there might be something important that is highlighted in the difference of their opinions. But generally speaking, yeah, they should come to close to the same conclusions in theory.
I think it's going to be tough to predict. I think in a best case scenario, like in a perfect world, yes, independent risk teams would have, sourcing true data that wasn't, flawed or, manipulated, and they have scientifically proven or repeatable methodologies to come to these conclusions. But I don't know. I think that I'd be surprised, or I'll be interested to see whether the different risk teams come up with identical conclusions. I think that this is where there's the opportunity for maker voters to step in, and this is where we do kind of actually rely on the wisdom of the crowd a bit. So,
and can I add really quick, just on the technical side, we're also working. So risk is not just about what they're doing with the liquidity and the price versus value and all the stuff. It's also just basically if a token is ERC20 compliant, and if it's going to work correctly with our system, or if it's not, and we need to create wrappers for it. And that's what we're doing right now with a lot of different tokens. So it's also not going to name any token right now, but there's a few ones that are more well-behaved than others. So, yeah. And I have to shut up because the dogs are barking, but we're also doing a lot of technical.
Yeah, so I think that before the dogs interrupted Mariano, that there's development type safeguards that are wrapped around these tokens as well. So
yeah, and not only that, but there's also risks around recourse. There's risks around there's just a whole bunch of risks that all have to be considered in their own right.
Actually, yeah, Dave, I think that this is probably going to be right up your alley. So we have a SoundCloud of the audio versions of our last 13 scientific governance meetings, and we start talking about risk a great deal. And I think that this might be something you'd enjoy. So
yeah, I'm going to post it in the chat right now.
Yeah. It sounds like a dry topic, but I've mentioned this a few times. My background is systems administration and IT, but having listened to these risk meetings for the last few months, I really wish that I went into a different line of work, because this stuff is fascinating. There's so many.
It really is. It really is.
Thank you. Yeah, I fell in the rabbit hole about 1.5 years ago and just have been reading nothing but economics and history of money.
So Iron Rand asks, thank you. If the risk team's reports are in alignment, what are the benefits of asking the maker holders? I mean, the benefits are, I think it's it's the necessity, because maker holders are ultimately the ones that are enacting the changes in the system. So like if there's a proposal by one of the risk teams that everybody sort of agrees on, then the people that have to enact it are the maker holders. So it's not really, I don't know if that question really makes sense to me.
Well, I think there's governance is complicated, I think, is the subtext that needs to be remembered in every discussion like this. But if from a maker holders perspective, if I saw two risk teams whose reports were in perfect alignment, I would think A, that's great, and then I would think B, oh my God, collusion. We need to dig into this. Right?
So can I interject for a second?
Sure.
So I think
okay, go ahead.
I don't think we will ever see all the research kind of being in alignment and pointing to the same thing, because it's all going to come down to kind of risk appetite and what you want to optimize for. So one risk team
100% true.
may be trying to optimize for DAI growth and may want to set more aggressive debt ceilings, more lower stability fees, right, to try and juice up and stimulate growth while taking on more risk, right, to just scale the system quicker. While another team may say, you know, like, no, like the stability of the system is super paramount, even if we are crippling growth in the meantime, right? Because if we ever, right, break the peg, then no one will ever trust us again. We only get one shot at this, right? And everyone else can fall right somewhere in between on some compromise on those two extreme ends. And so it's really up to MKR holders to take a view of the land and say, okay, well, we have these different models for these that optimize for these different types of objectives. And then MKR holders can say, you know what, like we as a group feel like we're more focused on growth right now. And, you know, if we get, you know, some MKR dilutions along the way, it's not a big deal, right? Because the long-term, right, profit potential is so great, right? Or they may disagree, right? But it's ultimately down to them because they're the ones that are putting their kind of money on the line, so to speak, that they're the ones that make the decision ultimately. The academics can only provide options.
That's a great point. Actually, I hadn't considered that. So
Yeah,
it's maker voters are essentially determining which monetary policy that they're more inclined to follow. That's cool.
Yeah, risk appetite for sure, 100%.
All right, well, that's a cool conversation. And Dave, I think that you should join our Thursday meetings because we get really deep into the weeds, and these are the kind of topics that we discuss, and we'll have some more dedicated experts there that could answer some of your detailed questions. But Lenka is here, and I think that she might have some updates for us. Is that true, Lenka?
Yes. Hello. So finally, I got my. Hi guys. I'm at the Warsaw Airport right now, so I had some Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all kinds of issues. But we had a really cool meetup yesterday. It was dedicated only to Maker, but it wouldn't happen without the help from the ETHWorks guys. Actually, you remember the doppelganger hack from the Status Hackathon by Anthony and some other cool guys. We also met in Prague a couple days ago, and it has been hosted by Campus, which is a nice co-working space in the heart of Warsaw, basically run by Google. So really cool spaces. I think we also managed to record it, so hopefully it will be soon available. And the first talk was by Lev. He was giving this his economic twist into the introduction into Maker, and then the second presentation was by Pavel, and it was diving deep into the keepers area. And and afterwards we did the Deppy Hour, and we did it in a special venue that is actually hidden behind the bookshelf. So we had a lot of interaction also with the physical DAI tokens, and already had some brainstorms how to improve the experience. And people are really happy about being able to interact with those. But it was also good that we had a lot of constructive discussions about how can we actually make this even better. So today I met with some of the people from the local scene and hang out in the Warsaw office we have at Mindspace. It's really cool. And heading back. All in all, it was a really nice experience. I did some tweets throughout the day. So and when the talks are ready, I would share them again. That's it for me. Oh,
Thank you. That was awesome.
Oh, one more thing. actually, two more things. It's crazy busy with events. Last Thursday, we had our Gustav, who is a BizDev for Europe, to do a pitch in Copenhagen. He did really well. And this Thursday, Søren, head of product, will speak in Helsingborg at the Öresund event. And on Friday, we have a Nordic blockchain conference in Copenhagen, where we will have 3 times speaker opportunities. So if people are joining in Copenhagen, they're welcome to join us for the event. We will have Rune giving keynote, and we will have Rune and Jacek, our head of, our legal counsel for Europe, to join panels where they discuss their areas in regards to Maker and stablecoins. So, yeah, a lot of stuff is going to happen. And right now, there's a fun campaign going on Twitter. So check out. Hashtag Shenterhold. Sorry, I'll type it down into the chat.
Shatner Huddle.
Yes, I cannot pronounce it. Thanks, guys. Boom. Thank you. Sorry I missed the beginning of the talk, but yeah, that's it for me.
So Dave asked another interesting question in the chat. So if I understand correctly, on the 2.5% interest rate, 2% goes to the DAI savings interest paid. Will Maker be building up reserves by taking 0.5% on each loan, or where does that money go? So I think that the actual DAI savings rate hasn't been decided on. I think just people in talking about it have been like referencing like a 2% rate. But Nick, do you want to speak to that? I see your face popped up on the mic on the camera.
Oh, sure. I guess why not? I mean, sure. So yeah, the actual kind of profit you're making should be the difference between those, but you have to take into account some kind of K factor where not all DAI is going to be locked into the savings rate, right? It'll be some kind of fractional amount, right? Less than 100%. And the risk teams, when they're actually setting the savings rate, right, they actually take that into account as well, right? Because, right, they're trying to get some kind of magnitude change of behavior by the market, right? And if only some certain part of the market is taking that seriously, right, they need to maybe be a little bit more on the scalar side than they think. But yeah.
The money that doesn't go to the savings, though, that money, is that, is Maker's value sort of are people thinking a big part of that will be that reserves are going to be built up, or is that going to be spent for running the system itself, or is that the hope to build up reserves for something, or what?
So the stability fee goes towards like burning Maker, right? It's the buy and burn mechanism, and then there's a part of that fee that is going to be going to the DAI savings rate. And the way that it there's an important difference in how single collateral DAI works versus multi-collateral, in that and again, this is still like unconfirmed to me, but this is just what I've been hearing in the pipeline, is that the interest is taken up front rather than when people actually pay down their CDPs. So like right now, when people pay down their CDPs, that's when the buy and burn happens. So you pay back a Maker, and that Maker is immediately sent into the burner address. Whereas in multi-collateral DAI, the idea is that as interest is accrued, there will be sort of like a supplementary smart contract that is issuing DAI and buying Maker and sending the appropriate amounts to the DAI savings rate contract. And so when people actually end up paying back their CDPs, instead of the buy and burn, or the burn happening there, their interest that's paid in DAI is simply just destroyed because it had already been functionally like burned and distributed to the DAI savings rate. So I think that, I don't know if that answers your question a little better.
In other words, they're not storing, I don't know, the money that comes from this interest. They're using it to burn Maker?
All fees that come into the system are sent to a burner contract and used to. So all fees that are accrued into the system are used to buy and burn Maker that's on the open market.
This makes me think I need to learn more about the burning. If there's any articles, not that you haven't sent me enough already, but
well, it's not a very complicated. There's not much to read actually. So every time the system, the contracts, somebody pays back some of their DAI debt, they need to pay 2.5% in fees for the length of the age of that debt, and that fee that they pay is immediately transferred to a burner contract, and so the amount of outstanding DAI in the ecosystem goes down every time somebody interacts by paying back to the system.
And so on one hand, I think, well, eventually you burn all the Maker, but the idea is that the value goes up, so you would burn less and less.
Well,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's
You're
divisible
never
to
going to get
18
it.
decimals, so
Right.
there's a lot of it there.
Yeah, and the more pressure there is to burn, the higher the price goes, because there's always a demand for Maker, because it's like sort of part of that mechanism. So again, the more you burn, necessarily the Maker price will have to go up. So you actually will never be able to get it to zero.
I mean, one day we'll have 1/10⁸ MKR in existence, and then we've reached the singularity. If we're lucky.
We start talking about the heat death of the universe.
I'm not sure that's so easy to understand, but you know, for me at least.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Great questions. We appreciate you coming in on the call for sure.
They've been building up over a few weeks, and if I come next week,
hey, come. You're more than welcome. We love talking to you.
Appreciate it.
All right, so I don't have anything else specific on my agenda. If anybody has any other questions, or if Nick, Richard, anybody want to bring anything up that I'm missing, feel free to do so.
Nothing off the top of my head. I know subconsciously that there's probably a pile, but I'm having trouble thinking of what those might be right now.
Andy's talk got posted in sort of the cut version, so you no longer have to like look for the exact time in that like 6-hour video that it used to be. But now they have the sort of only his talk version of that video, and I could post it up in the chat.
Nice, David.
Hey, it was important. It was a good talk. It deserved its own, snippet.
For those of you who haven't seen it, go take a look, because Andy really, really practiced the hell out of that, and it shows. It was very well received. Okay, guys. It seems like we're kind of wrapping up here, and we're almost at the top of the hour, right?
Yeah, about 8 minutes to the hour. I'll be hanging out in here for like the next 5 or 6 minutes, but I guess we could wrap it up. Yeah, definitely. Oh
Okay.
yeah, Lenka, we did mention that. So Mikey Ray McDonald, he put up that we locked 1 million ETH in our contracts. So officially in the side tub. So it's mentioned it earlier in the video or in the call.
Okay. Anyways.
Cool. Anyway,
I'm gonna head out, guys.
Take care.
See ya. Take it easy.
Bye, everybody. I'm gonna hang out in here for a little while. Oh, hey, Jess.